Okay, good. So Novak, are you ready now?
Yes. So thanks again for the opportunity to share. So I'm just going to get started right away. So the opening ceremony, I think, really set the tone for the week with Professor Elkington sort of tying together his triple bottom line with people, planet, and profit. And it sort of was well reflected in that transition from shareholder value to system value. And I think that really meshed well with the theme of Governance Week, which was, of course, regenerative capitalism, the idea of sustainable creation rather than exploitative destruction. So I think what I typically like to do when I attend conferences, for me personally, I get value. I think if I get one wow moment for each day that I attend, I got something from it. So I think I got these wow moments every single day, even though I want to say that I have no experience, not even research background with small and medium enterprises and public sector. Those were outside of my research interest. My research was really focused on sort of corporate conglomerates and higher end. So the first day, I think what stood out for me was when Ms. Watson highlighted that corporate governance failures have far-reaching impact beyond shareholders and stakeholders as sort of an abstract concept, but more so the people, you, me, and our loved ones. And you know, that really resonated with me coming out of the very first day. The second day had a sub-theme of management versus governance. And I think there was a really interesting point made by both Dr. Khan and Mr. Romano about this sort of tug of war between sustainability and profits. And some of the sidebar chats, I mean, it was really well engaging that these two concepts are not mutually exclusive by any means. And I think that was reiterated today, where I think it was Mr. Das sort of mentioned that there are studies that show companies that have a vested interest in sustainability show better bottom line profits, if I remember correctly. The third day's sub-theme was governance in the private sector, and the wow moment for me there came in the session chat, but it impacted me so well that I took note. I can't remember if it was Mr. Loftus who said it, but the comment was that standards are the floor and not the ceiling. And I mean, the context there was in implementing formal frameworks. And I mean, I'm going to steal that for you when I'm making my own case for consideration for frameworks to be adopted in my organization. So I mean, that really, I think that out of all it is, that particular comment, I think stood out for me the most. Before day, of course, we discussed sort of SMEs and family-owned businesses, and the concept of legacy coming out here was a resounding moment for me. And the fact that a seed planted by the first generation would have a fundamentally different meaning to the third and fourth generation. And I remember Mr. Rajkumar's point that not every family member needs to be a part of the business. So that is probably a very difficult conversation, but for family-owned businesses, it may be a very important one. And today, the sub-theme was, of course, governance of groups and conglomerates. And I think there was a particularly interesting discussion around purpose. And I mean, I think it was provocative, to say the least. But from my takeaway, I think that purpose is a very paradoxical concept, because on one hand, I think Mr. Romano suggested that it's implicit and part of the organizational DNA and part of this 100-year plan, I think, from Jim Collins, I think what was referenced. But the thing about purpose, it also needs to be agile enough to respond to the global environment. So think of the environmental impact. What was a company's purpose in the last 50 years may not necessarily be their purpose now going into the next 50. So I think that was sort of a paradox about purpose, for me at least personally. And just generally, my takeaway is that the conversations that happen in and around the presentation were way more powerful than the presentations themselves. And I'm not meaning this as an indictment of the panelists or the presenters, but I think I want to celebrate it as the caliber of the participants and the level of discussion that was taking place there. I mean, I really feel welcomed in this community, and thanks very much for the opportunity to share again.
Thank you, Novak. I really appreciate you sharing that. This was Novak's. Novak is a new member of CCGI, and this is his first governance week with us. So it was really refreshing to see him so connected and being able to share what were some of the key highlights for him during this full week. And Daniela, is it possible for you to share your thoughts now?
Hi, yes. Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks again, Kamla, for the invitation to share. For me, this governance week, I believe it was my second or third governance week, and I feel like there was something extra special about it. I really, truly appreciate the thoughtfulness that the CCGI put into it because I could really see how, even in terms of the structure from day 1 to 5, even in the order of the panels on every day, it was all connected. And Governance Week this year really told a story. I also appreciate the diversity of the panels. I always enjoy some of my favorite governance professionals, always enjoy hearing their perspectives and listening to them share both on and off the panels this year was refreshing. And, being able to share views as a young, I think of myself as a governance baby, and it really is, I'm grateful to the CCGI for providing a platform for persons at all levels of their careers in governance, and even persons who just have a small interest in governance, to have this space where we can learn and grow and really just feel welcome and appreciated. The most special thing about Governance Week for me was, well, I have two most special things about Governance Week. And it is one, the emphasis on ensuring that governance is relevant to all generations. And ensuring that even as in order for governance to remain relevant, we need to, at every single stage, contemplate how it affects the different generations. And two, that it really was a call to action for everybody who is already involved in governance to do more, get more involved, and don't just go alone. Take others along with you. So I am really looking forward to seeing some of the initiatives that we spoke about this week being brought into fruition. I will definitely be keeping my eyes and ears open and reaching out to the CCGI to find out how I can do my part and take people along with me.
Great. Thank you so much, Daniela. Okay, so we just lost the spotlight on our chairman. Let me just bring him back on. I wasn't sure what happened there, but thank you, Daniela. Yes, and I really appreciate that contribution as well. Particularly your recognition of the point of us trying to embrace across the generations, because we can't just talk it. We've noted time and again the importance of understanding the different generations and being able to engage everyone, particularly the younger persons, because their contribution is going to be so important for us to get this thing right, because this world really belongs to the younger generation with the pace of technology and the kinds of changes that we are facing. And so whilst we have Professor Garratt, and Professor Garratt, I only learned this week from you that you were close to 90 years old. One will never believe it with the amount of work you do.
Not quite true, but in my 80s, yeah.
Okay. Okay, so having you and then having a persons who are still in their 20s who have an interest in learning and wanting to be able to understand more and to engage with others so that they could really fine-tune their understanding to make a good contribution. That is really the platform that we are offering, and we are happy to engage persons, because this is not something that CCGI can do. It is all of us together working in this space. So, Nigel, your thoughts?
For me, the tension is always between profitability and ensuring that you are creating value for your customers. there is a tension, but it should not be an antagonistic situation, because if you're not making profit, you're not going to survive. Only public sector entities that have the support of governments can afford to continue to exist without making profits, and that is not sustainable. And again, profit is not a four-letter word, by the way, and people need to understand that. And but the point we made when we looked at the Boeing situation is, if you lose sight of your purpose, and if you lose the principles that guide behavior, you're going to run into serious trouble, and you're going to run into serious trouble very quickly. So that, I think every organization has to take on board the fact that we live or we exist in community. And I just read a headline today that over 1 billion people are being impacted by rising heat, and you've seen it all over the world. And if we don't appreciate the impact that the warming of the planet is having, and if we don't engage our teams in efforts to mitigate that impending disaster, I don't know how much respect as organizations we will continue to get from our various stakeholders. And therefore, that has to be front and center while delivering on our purpose. So I'll leave it there for now, and we can get further into the conversation.
Yes, and just as I invite Professor Garratt to share his thoughts, I want to add to what you have said, Nigel, with respect to using Boeing as an example. And I'm happy that we were able to share the short video earlier so that everyone could have seen and understood. It appears to be so easy for organizations to lose their way, because that was not a yesterday issue. This has been happening for several years, and clearly no one has been able to address it in a way to prevent the continual challenges that Boeing has been facing. And so, I will say again, I feel that board should be held totally accountable. They should all be called upon to speak as to what they did and why, and what was the outcome they really expected. If it is that they are just increasing the salary of their CEO at a point in time, and by 43% too, not a 10% that you would say, okay, it's an incremental increase to deal with whatever stress and so. No, this is a near 50% that is saying to me, I think you're doing an outstanding job, keep at it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And that's at a time when planes are falling and people are dying. Professor Garratt. I was happy to share with Professor Garratt earlier this week the fact that Professor John Elkington wrote a blog following his delivery of our opening keynote on Sunday. And in it, he spoke a lot about having read Professor Garratt's work as well, The Fish Rot from the Head. And Professor Garratt, I was so happy that, to have you be part of all this, because as he said, he didn't know that you were our global ambassador, but we have proven how much value you have brought to us here at CCGI. You have really inspired us to keep pushing the envelope to see what we can do. And I will be happy in a bit to share the last paragraph in particular from Professor Elkington's post. But Professor Garratt.
Oh, okay, thank you. Yes, it's been a long day today, because I started with the master's students on the new program, corporate governance program in Indonesia, in the Islamic University in Indonesia, and they are 7 hours ahead of me, and then you're 5 hours
Behind.
behind. And in between, there's quite a long day. So it's been very busy. I've nearly lost my voice, which people will be very happy to hear. I was just thinking back over the number of weeks, governors' weeks we have now run. And it's very noticeable that despite my total frustration that I've missed so many of them this time, because the quality is very high, despite that, I notice there's been a massive change in most people's discussion away from, for example, totally fixating on shareholder value. That seems to have disappeared almost. It hasn't totally vaporized, but it's not now an actually prime example. And this whole issue of sustainability and such like is coming through. There's also something in which I notice that CCGI is getting a bit naughty at the moment because it's doing fantastically good work, but it's not being good at curating it. And you are creating a wonderful database. And Professor Elkington came back to me afterwards to say he was knocked out by the quality of the questions and by the follow-up emails and messages he's had since. And they actually caused him to write that blog, which if anybody hasn't read it, is well worth having a look at. It's a very interesting blog. But my question to him was, well, how would you find out about this? And he says, I don't know, because this is where you're naughty. You're not really publicizing what you're doing, and yet it is world standard. So I'm going to insist that you start looking for a curator of your work. And this is not just another job for Kamla. This is a serious piece of work. That it may be a research project at the university, maybe something like that, where someone could get a master's or a PhD actually being to pull together what it is you're doing. But it's too good a quality. And then I have really two things to say, and I promise I'll shut up. One is about the talks today with the Indonesian master's students. And these are much younger, new university, Islamic focus university, and very much the next generation of potential or actual directors. Some already directors in family businesses, most of them not, but aspiring towards becoming a director. And I made some notes just now, and as it's late at night and my eyes are getting a little tired, I shall now pick up a piece of paper just to try and read my own notes. Right, here we go. Yeah, what I noticed was about, this is 35 master's students in Indonesia, covering mainly Indonesia, Malaysia, some Southeast Asians as well. Their future mindsets we were talking about, and them as the next generation. And it was very interesting to me that they were all already giving not nasty, but a little bit of attention to their lecturers and their professors, because they were saying that future governance is no longer about those technical areas of accountancy and law and industry specialists and such like. You need such folk around. They're necessary, but they're not sufficient. And it's the sufficiency of developing the mindset of the new boards, which have to be much wider and much more geared on what is actually happening in the external environment, yet whilst keeping a very careful finger on what is happening internally in their organizations. And they realize that that is quite a challenge for them. And it's a challenge in which they have not been brought up to actually face, but they're very, very keen to do so. And that kept coming through in various ways. So they were saying, for example, even CRG, which is the name of, technically it's the name of their current master's program, that is not sufficient. even ESG is not sufficient. And how do we go beyond that to develop the new form of corporate governance? What is that actually going to be about? And that I found very interesting. And they said, yes, there are new technical issues coming up, which have been mentioned already. How do we deal with cybersecurity? How do we deal with generative AI? But they were quite interesting on that because they were saying already they understand that generative AI in its present form, at least, and the way it is developing, creates global amounts of data, but it's critical thinking and, if you like, intelligent naivety, which actually allows you to ask the questions of that global amount of data. And they are only just beginning to realize that they have to learn that way of thinking and the humility of intelligent naivety to ask questions of a very messy environment. And I was very interested in that and looking at the way they were coming through there. What they were saying, though, is if that's not sufficient, then sufficiency in future for what they think their generation is going to need is very much based on the notion of sustainability. But that's a jargon word at the moment, and even they are aware that it is jargon. So the notion that was coming through more strongly towards the end of the session was they have to see their organization as a living entity which exists, but only for a time, in an ecological system which supports them one way or another, but is changing, and that support could suddenly vaporize.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's how do they intellectually deal with if we go right back to the basis of the law, the common law in corporate governance, how do we ensure we have a healthy future? That's it. How do we do that? We must keep asking that question. So the ecological niche was one of the things that came through. And behind that was a total acceptance of the need for learning constantly, learning of the external environment, learning about their organizational health and how they sustain that, and learning about their own development. And it's all in all of those that I think CCGI has a very big place to play there. And then, if I can read my writing anymore, let me see. It comes back to CCGI then. This is a separate point. That you have done brilliantly well, and you really are changing the thing. I stress again that Professor Elkington was absolutely knocked out by the quality of the debate and the energy, the enthusiasm there. And he liked, particularly as I do, the focus on how do we develop these small, smart states. I think that's a very important issue going forward for the region, but it's for many other parts of the world as well. Very, very important indeed. And in doing that, and this is where the curating part comes in, I think you have a stronger voice already than you realize, but you're not using it. And it was interesting to me, at least, that at the start of Professor Elkington's talk, he was quoting Ronald Daythorne Baird's statistics and saying there are very, very few parts of the world where we can get that type, the quality and quantity of those statistics out. And here, suddenly, he finds they exist in the Caribbean, which is the last place he would have thought looking for. So again, how can you help encourage others to develop that type of research, both to support Ronelle and what she's doing, but to allow others to do the same? That I think is going to be very important for you in future. And the reason all of that comes together in my head is because I think in the next few years, you can develop a sufficiently expert and trusted voice to begin to affect your politicians on the one hand, but CARICOM generally on the other. as a developmental body. And I salute you for it. I think you've done brilliantly well in a very short time, and long may it continue. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Garratt. We couldn't have done this without you. As I said, you know, the inaugural Governance Week, we reached out to you. I had never met you. You had never heard of me. But thankfully, you know, you were more than willing to take us up on this challenge that in the midst of COVID, nobody knew what was going on. Let us try and have a week of conference, focus on governance, because it's so important for us to understand what we are doing and get it right. So we also are extremely appreciative of your guidance and your support over the years that has helped us to raise our profile in this way.
Thank you.
So for me, one of the challenges I want to first address on the table very clearly is in developing what the future would look like. We really need to find a way to embrace the younger persons to have their voices very much involved in the conversation. Because as I said at the end of after we had closed off the opening ceremony, I believe that generations previous to us would have made errors, but in the majority of instances, these were not intentional. People worked with what information they had at the time, and they felt that what they were doing was the right thing. Our generations are similarly making a lot of mistakes, but we are doing so without having full information. Like one of the things I shared during our certificate in corporate governance program, you know, I recall when there was a huge concern about the use of paper and deforestation. And so the world went to plastic because we thought that will save the trees. And now look at where we are at. So I think even as we try to figure out some of these solutions, it is so key that we get the voices of younger people, especially because of the pace of advance in technology and the AI that's about to happen. A lot of us will not understand the technology and how to use it efficiently to make sure that the decisions we make are at least going to work out for the kinds of outcomes that we want. So that is really a major challenge, I think, for us moving forward to ensure we build that communication gap and that we are working together. I'm really, really happy that we are a Caribbean-based organization. So we naturally have the voices in the region that is contributing our thoughts and our experiences and how we can solve a lot of these problems, because we really can't do it alone, right? It's all of us working together. And as I say that, I also do want to acknowledge Axel Kravitsky in our midst. I think Axel just joined us again, but he was among our founding directors. He was the founding chairman, and along with Nigel and a few other persons to really have the vision to know that this institute was necessary for us. I also truly appreciate that we are a nonprofit organization, that we are not an organization that was set up by big business, nor are we an organization that is aligned in any way to any government, because what it then does is gives us the freedom to truly develop critical thought, to ask the difficult questions, and to really try our best in ensuring that we do the best we can and we leave that best to the next generation for them to continue as well, right? So that those are really important things, I think, for us moving forward. Nigel?
Yeah. What I will add to that is, and I want to thank Professor Garratt for his push to curate and to really make this body of knowledge available. But for me, the critical thing going forward here is how do we raise the level of the criticality of how important governance is, or good governance is, and how do we help organizations to execute, to implement the principles and practices that would help them to be more sustainable, to be more successful, to be more profitable. And doing so while serving their various constituencies in a win-win fashion, so that, again, the emphasis on first creating value, and then how do you capture enough value from that to continue to create value. If we look at it like that, so profit is the value you can capture for yourself, and understand that you are in fact creating the value first and doing it in such a way that allows you to retain some of the value created so that you continue to grow and thrive. Again, the emphasis on win-win as opposed to win-lose. I really not creating value. I'm really basically extracting value from those that we serve. So for me, that's one of the things I would like to see us focus on. How do we help organizations to improve their governance in a very real way through education, through maybe interventions to help them to improve the quality of their governance, and obviously to get them to be more successful. Governance is not governance for governance sake. It's governance to help them to grow and thrive and become more efficient and more successful. If we can get that across, as opposed to governance as compliance, you know what I mean? That for me is the distinction.
And if I may continue along that thought that you have raised, Nigel, so getting the governance right and looking at the value that we bring also means that we have to prepare ourselves for some measure of discomfort from time to time. Because once we are talking about change, it means that you have to give up the status quo. You have to give up all that you feel comfortable and happy with. And that is throughout the organization. You need, even within the operations, for things to be done differently. And that's going to disrupt people's work. It's going to disrupt people's comfort zone. And so having the board understand and appreciate that and be able to lead that change. Because it's one thing to talk about the board setting the strategic direction, but ensuring that the organization is equipped to go down that road is equally important.
Definitely.
So we do have some plans that we hope to roll out over the next few months in ways in which CCGI is going to align with organizations and encourage them to walk this road, that we can help with measurement. We have discussed measurement so many times in Governance Week that if we are not measuring, then we will not know where we are on that journey. So those are among the things that we plan to do. I'm also happy there are lots of other organizations in the region that want to collaborate with us. So we will actively get involved in those partnerships. So I accept, Professor Garratt, a lot of these are not additional chores I will take on for myself personally. Because I think I did that. I think, the 5 years were necessary hard work for us to set the foundation and to establish, who we are as CCGI and the value we wish to bring. And I think now we can allow for persons to come into that space to ensure that we take it to the next level. And I would be quite happy to do that.
Definitely.
Yes. All right, so can we open it up as well? I imagine in the next 10 minutes or so, we may be able to wrap up, but we are so thankful. We have some very loyal and faithful persons who have been with us, not just throughout today, but who have joined many times during the week and, you know, have been here working and supporting us at CCGI. I see Alasdair is here with us. Alasdair is from Belize and led his company to become a member of CCGI last year, and this year became a sponsor for Governance Week for us for the first time. So, Alasdair, I know you might be on the road now, so if you can't unmute safely, then don't. But I'm just acknowledging and appreciating you, and we love having your support and that presence from Belize as well. Cecile, I see that you are still with us. So if you have any thoughts that you would like to share, this being the first time you have interacted with CCGI and been so involved, you did a brilliant job in that opening session on Monday. So if you have any thoughts as well that you would like to share, I'll be happy to have you unmute and share. And of course, I'm opening that to other persons in the room as well. I'm recognizing Sandy Richards from the BVI, who is here with us, Tracy Campbell from Jamaica, Nigel from St. Lucia, Jose is located here in Trinidad and Tobago with us, Jacqueline Curiel from Curacao. So and forgive me, I'm not really ignoring us from Trinidad and Tobago, but making sure to recognize the people who I know have really joined in with us from the region to make sure that we are truly reflecting our Caribbean base. Okay, so Cecile has put in the chat that she's not able to unmute right now, but she's really enjoyed the discussion and it was great to be present. Thank you, Cecile. Appreciate it. Okay, last call for any other contribution from anyone before I formally wrap up Governance Week 2024.
I just want to thank you, Kamla, for your leadership and hard work. Your level of energy is amazing. And I'm very grateful, and I think all of us at CCGI are very grateful for your passion and commitment to the good governance cause. You make being a chairman so easy. Thank you very much, and we have a lot of work to do, and I am committing to work with you to execute, help people to execute and improve their governance going forward. And as somebody said, it's not about legislation, it's not about regulation. Good governance leads to successful businesses. And I want to emphasize that fact. So thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Nigel, and I really appreciate it. I appreciate all the positive feedback that I have gotten, and yes, it was a lot of work. I remember Professor Garratt would be saying to me, "Please get some sleep," because he's realizing that sometimes 2 o'clock morning I'm still up sending emails and all of that. But I felt it was necessary work in the early stages. That's what a transformation requires. But I'm quite comfortable that where we are at now, so I can step back. We are training staff to ensure that we can take things further. But I want to appreciate everyone. This wasn't work for me because I've truly loved doing it.
Yep.
But I couldn't have done it without the many people who contributed their voices. You know, from when we began Governance Week, we began with 50 people. Why? Because there are people in the region who do want us to do better, to be better, to build a region that we are proud of, that we are going to be able to pass on to the next generation, knowing that we have done the best that we can. And that is what helps in making this burden a lot lighter and really make it a work of joy. And as I say that, I have to especially recognize Claire Gomez-Miller, who has been such solid support since day one in the work we do here at CCGI. So thank you all for what you do to help ensure that this is such a great success as well.